really just want Mom back, okay? Right now, we believe Nancy is still out there. We want her home. Blood on the porch, that was one we did. It came back to Nancy. At this time, we have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case. We are working our best to do that. But to be clear,
the sheriff said it on camera. He said, from day one, they had strong beliefs about what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Strong beliefs. Those are his exact words. And then he said nothing else. He declined to share the theory. An 84-year-old woman gone from her home in the middle of the night. And the man running the investigation announced to the country that he knew something, and then went silent. If you want to follow where this case actually leads, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this is not going to be the version of this story that gets cleaned up for a press conference. This is the version where we follow the evidence and ask the questions that nobody in a position of authority seems willing to answer. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She was not an abstraction. She was not a headline. She was a woman who had lived in the Tucson area for more than 50 years, who had raised her children in Arizona's desert heat, who had watched her daughter climb from local television to become the face of one of the most watched morning shows in American history, and who, according to people who knew her, was still sharp, still present, still deeply connected to her faith and her family at 84 years old. Every Sunday, she went to church. That detail matters more than it might seem. We will come back to it. The night of January 31st, 2026, Nancy had dinner with her family. That is the last confirmed sighting of her. She went home. She was alive. She was inside her house. And then sometime in the dark hours between late January 31st and the early morning of February 1st, something happened inside and around that home that the investigation has still not fully explained to the public. 45 days later, her phone was still in the house. Her other essential belongings were still in the house. She had limited mobility. She was dependent on daily medication so critical that her own sheriff publicly stated she could face a fatal outcome if she did not receive it every 24 hours. Deputies responding to that home on February 1st took one look at what they found and immediately concluded this was not a routine missing person report. She had not walked away. She had not wandered. Something had been done to her. Here's the first thing that makes no logical sense. Before we go any further into this case, there is one detail that I need you to hold in your mind, because it is going to reshape everything you think you understand about how this investigation was run. The Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, said publicly and on the record that investigators had, quote, strong beliefs about what happened from day one. Not suspicions, not hunches, strong beliefs. He said those beliefs had not diminished. And then he refused to say what those beliefs were. Now, law enforcement withholds operational details all the time. That is standard practice. That is normal. But here is what is not normal. The same investigation that claimed strong beliefs on day one also spent 45 days producing 0 arrests, releasing a suspect's photo that was too grainy and masked to be of any public use, after watching 2 people get briefly detained and then released, and presiding over an evidence chain that investigators themselves have quietly acknowledged may have been compromised. Strong beliefs on day 1. 0 arrests on day 45. Those two facts do not belong in the same case unless something went wrong in between them. And here is where this story gets dark in a way that has nothing to do with the crime itself. Because what went wrong may not just be about one man in a mask with a backpack. What went wrong may also be about the systems and the people responsible for finding him. Let us rebuild this from the beginning, because the timeline of this case is not what most coverage has made it appear. February 1st, 2026. Nancy does not show up for church. That is how anyone knows something is wrong. Not a distress call, not a triggered alarm, not a neighbor reporting something unusual. She misses church, and the people who love her come looking. When they arrive at her home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, she is not there. She was supposed to be there. Her things are there. She is not. Pima County Sheriff's Department is called. Deputies respond. They see immediately that she did not leave on her own terms. The investigation opens. And at that moment, that very first moment, Sheriff Nanos later tells us, they already had strong beliefs. Now hold that thought, because I need to take you back even further. Investigators are now focused on two specific dates that fall before February 1st. January 11th, 2026, a Saturday, and January 24th, 2026, also a Saturday. Those are not random calendar dates. Those are the dates that FBI agents have been going back to neighborhood homes asking about. Those are the dates they wanted surveillance footage from, not February 1st footage, not January 31st footage. Footage from 3 weeks earlier, from a month earlier. What does that tell you? It tells you investigators believe the abduction was not impulsive. It was not opportunistic. Someone had been watching Nancy Guthrie's home, not once, but on multiple separate occasions, before they ever moved on her. A journalist covering the case, Brian Enton, noted something that stops you cold when you really think about it. Both dates fall on weekends. January 11th, Saturday. January 24th, Saturday. And then the abduction itself. Late January 31st into February 1st. Weekend behavior, over and over again. The working theory among people closely following this investigation is that whoever took Nancy Guthrie was someone who spent their weekdays doing something else. Someone who used their weekend time, their free time, to drive through that neighborhood, learn the rhythms of that street, study that house, study that woman, and plan. That planning did not happen overnight. It did not happen in a week. If investigators are pulling footage from January 11th, they believe the surveillance of Nancy Guthrie began at least 3 weeks before she disappeared. 3 weeks of someone watching her. And the people whose job it is to prevent exactly this kind of crime had no idea it was happening. If this case deserves more light, and every day that passes without Nancy home is a day that proves it does, hit the like button right now, because the algorithm decides who sees this story. You decide whether it spreads. Now, what do we actually know about the night she was taken? At approximately 2:36 in the morning on February 1st, a ring camera belonging to a neighbor roughly 2.5 miles from Nancy's home captured a car moving through the neighborhood, moving fast. That footage was obtained by Fox News Digital. Law enforcement confirmed they were aware of it and were reviewing it. 2.5 miles, in the middle of the night, moving at speed. Investigators reviewed approximately 10,000 hours of video footage in the weeks that followed. And that single image of a fast-moving car in the dark remains one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the public record. But here's the piece that does not get enough attention. It's around the time Nancy disappeared. In those same early morning hours of February 1st, there was an internet outage in her neighborhood. Neighbors reported that their home security camera footage from that night was either missing or marked unavailable. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed it was investigating a damaged utility box located around the corner from Nancy Guthrie's house. The Sheriff's Department said publicly, "There were events that caused things to go offline at Nancy's property, and they were trying to determine what caused it. They raised the possibility that the Wi-Fi had been disrupted or that there had been a power interruption. And they asked whether other people in the neighborhood had experienced similar events at the same time. Think about what you are being told. If someone potentially cut or damaged a utility connection in the neighborhood in the hours before or during an abduction, in a way that could have disrupted surveillance systems on multiple homes at once. That is not a crime of passion. That is preparation. That is someone who understood that cameras were a problem and found a way to reduce them. The FBI confirmed it was examining whether internet disruptions in the neighborhood were connected to the abduction. They were, and at this point in the investigation, that connection has still not been fully explained to the public. At 6 o'clock in the morning on February 1st, deputies arrived at Nancy's home. Inside, they found her belongings. They found her phone. They found evidence, according to Sheriff Nanos, that she had not left on her own. Evidence that indicated the situation was, in his words, more than a routine missing person report. Blood was found in the home. And then, 9 days later, on February 10th, the FBI released what would become the most recognizable image in this case. Doorbell camera footage showing a figure at Nancy's front door, masked, armed, wearing gloves, carrying what the FBI later identified as a black 25-liter Ozark trail hiker pack. FBI Director Kash Patel described this person as an armed individual appearing to have tampered with the camera at Nancy Guthrie's front door the morning of her disappearance. Tampered with the camera. This person knew the camera was there, approached it anyway, and interfered with it. That takes a specific level of either confidence or desperation. And it suggests someone who was not concerned about being seen, possibly because they believed the footage would never be recovered, or possibly because they believed the mask and the gloves were enough. But here is the question that has sat at the center of this case since February 10th. If investigators had, in their own words, strong beliefs from day one, and if they had a video of a masked person at her door, why has no arrest been made? Over 45 days. Over 10,000 hours of surveillance footage reviewed. Over 1,500 tips generated by the family's $1 million reward offer. Over 700 of those deemed credible by the FBI. 2 people detained and released. 0 suspects named. 0 charges filed. Drop your theory in the comments. Because here is what I know. You have been paying attention to this case. You have read the reports. You have watched the press conferences. And I want to know, what do you think is actually happening here? Not what you hope. What do you actually think? Let us talk about the glove. About 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, investigators found a glove. The glove appeared to generically match the kind worn by the person caught on the doorbell camera. This was not a minor lead. This was potentially physical evidence left behind by whoever took Nancy. The Pima County Sheriff's Department sent the glove to a lab. They also entered the DNA profile recovered from that glove into the FBI's national database. And then they confirmed the match came back to a nearby restaurant employee. Someone who worked in the area and had nothing to do with the case. Dead end. But here is the wrinkle. Other gloves were found in the vicinity. Those other gloves were sent to a private lab in Florida. And as of the most recent reporting, the results from those samples had not yet come back. That testing is still pending. What those gloves yield, if anything, remains unknown. And in a case where physical evidence has been rare and difficult to trace, those results matter in a way that is difficult to overstate. Meanwhile, neighbors in the Catalina foothills were doing something that law enforcement apparently was not doing fast enough: talking to each other. One neighbor, a woman named Laura, spoke to journalist Brian Entin in detail about what the neighborhood had felt like before and after the disappearance. And what she described was unsettling. Laura told Entin that she noticed something about a rental property near Nancy's home. Whoever had been living in that rental had moved out within a few days of Nancy's disappearance. A few days. Not weeks later. Not a month later. Days. That detail was shared with investigators. The neighbor could not provide hard evidence to connect the renters to the crime. Her security cameras only reached the end of her own driveway. But the timing, someone nearby, gone within days, is the kind of detail that either means nothing or means everything. And as of this recording, that thread has not been publicly resolved. Investigators did go back to the neighborhood recently. FBI agents went door to door asking residents about neighbors who had moved out before Nancy vanished. They also asked for the names of every crew member who had worked on a house under construction nearby. They were building a map of who had been in that neighborhood, who had a reason to be there, who had access, who had left. The construction site detail matters more than it might appear at first glance. Someone casing a neighborhood on weekends would have legitimate cover if they had any connection to a work site in the area. You can park near a construction zone. You can walk through a street under the guise of checking on materials, on access points, on logistics. You become invisible because you are doing something that looks like it belongs there. Investigators were not looking at random strangers. They were looking for people with a connection to that specific geography. Here is what the pacemaker tells us. Nancy Guthrie had a pacemaker. That pacemaker, according to reporting on the case, stopped transmitting its signal at some point around the time of her disappearance. A pacemaker does not stop transmitting because someone wants it to. It stops transmitting when it moves out of range of a connected network, or when the person wearing it can no longer be detected by the system monitoring it. That signal going dark is a timestamp. It is a physical record of when Nancy Guthrie left the reach of her connected devices. Investigators have that data. What they have said publicly about it is almost nothing. But it represents a kind of evidence that is very difficult to fabricate. A biological record attached to her body that stopped speaking to the digital world at a specific moment. That moment is part of the timeline. And that timeline, combined with the car caught 2.5 miles away at 2:36 in the morning, begins to suggest a window, a narrow, specific window, when Nancy was moved. She was moved. That is what the evidence, taken together, describes. Someone who had watched her home on at least 2 Saturdays, possibly as far back as January 11th. Cut the neighborhood's internet connectivity, disabled or tampered with her doorbell camera, moved through the house, and took an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility out of her own home without any neighbor raising an alarm, without triggering a response, and without leaving behind a single piece of traceable physical evidence that has yet yielded a suspect. That level of operational planning does not develop overnight. It takes time. It takes knowledge. It takes someone who knew enough about Nancy Guthrie's life and her home to understand exactly when and how to act. Now, when the investigation. Because the investigation is its own story, and it is not a flattering one. Allegations of evidence tampering surfaced. Reports of unauthorized information leaks from inside the investigation began circulating. There were coordination failures between agencies, the kind of institutional dysfunction that does not make headlines during the first week of a case, but that emerges later when leads should have moved faster and did not. The FBI relocated its command post from Tucson to Phoenix, a move officials insisted did not reflect a diminishment of the investigation, though it was widely interpreted as one. Cadaver dogs, which had been deployed in the earlier stages of the search, were pulled from service. The use of those dogs signals something. Their removal signals something different. Investigators stopped looking for a living person in the places where cadaver dogs go. The search had shifted in nature, even if the official language had not yet fully shifted to match. There is a recall effort now against Sheriff Chris Nanos. A Republican congressional candidate named Daniel Gutierrez has begun collecting signatures to remove the sheriff from office. Gutierrez told News Nation that the Nancy Guthrie case was not the only reason, but it was the breaking point. The public face of this investigation was the same man who went to a basketball game while Nancy remained missing. The same man who contradicted himself in press conferences. The same man who confirmed there was no updated public safety risk in the neighborhood. One day after he had told the national press that the suspect could, quote, absolutely strike again. Both of those statements cannot be simultaneously true. And the fact that they were made within 24 hours of each other tells you something about how this investigation has been communicated, if not how it has been run. Former FBI agent Steve Moore went on the record to say something that should alarm everyone following this case. He said he was no longer convinced the abduction was a carefully planned ransom kidnapping. He said, and this is significant, that the person or people responsible never provided proof of life. Multiple ransom notes were sent to media outlets after Nancy's disappearance. The family made public statements indicating they were ready to talk, ready to listen, ready to pay. They released videos addressed directly to whoever had their mother. Desperate public pleas from Savannah Guthrie and her siblings, Annie and Cameron. They offered $1 million, and whoever took Nancy Guthrie did not respond in the way a ransom operation responds. No verifiable proof of life, no organized negotiation, notes sent to news outlets, not directly to the family. Moore said plainly, "It is possible this is something different. And if it is something different, if this is not about money, then the motivations, the profile, and the danger of this situation are entirely different from what the public has been led to believe." Forensic genetic genealogy is now being used on the DNA recovered in the case. It is the same technique that identified Brian Kohberger, the man who killed 4 University of Idaho students. After years of cold trail, it is not a fast process. An expert on CBS News explained it directly. You may end up with multiple people within the same DNA family who could potentially be suspects, and you have to investigate each one independently. That takes time, more time than Nancy Guthrie may have. Savannah Guthrie said it herself in a video that her family released on February 24th, the day they announced the $1 million reward. She acknowledged that her mother may already be gone. Those were her words. She was not speaking in the language of hope. She was speaking in the language of someone who has been told by law enforcement what the probabilities look like after weeks without contact from a person with serious health conditions who requires daily medication to survive. And yet the family has not stopped. They donated $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because they understood that their mother's story was visible in a way that most missing persons cases never are. Most 84-year-olds who disappear do not have daughters on national television. Most families cannot offer $1 million. Most cases do not get FBI directors releasing images on social media. Nancy Guthrie's story reached the world, and the world responded. Over 1,500 tips in the days after the reward was announced. Over 700 of them deemed credible. And still, nothing is broken. Elizabeth Smart, who was abducted from her own home at 14 years old and held for 9 months before being found alive, was asked about the Nancy Guthrie case. She said something that cuts to the center of every missing persons investigation. If a person disappears and they are not found within the first 24 to 48 hours, the chances of survival drop to almost zero. She said she does not give up on cases because she would not be alive if anyone had given up on hers. That is the testimony of someone who lived through exactly the nightmare that Nancy Guthrie's family is still living through. And it is the testimony of someone who survived because the public kept the story alive. Nancy Guthrie turns 84 last month in January. In the same month, she was taken from her home. She was born in Fort Wright, Kentucky, and she built a life of more than 5 decades in the Tucson desert. She had a security gate on her front door, a locked one, the kind of lock that requires real effort to bypass. She was careful. She was not careless or unaware. She was an 84-year-old woman living alone who had taken precautions, and it was not enough. Because whoever came for her on the night of January 31st had spent weeks learning exactly what those precautions were and planning around every single one of them. That is what the evidence points to. This was not random. This was not impulsive. This was studied, prepared, and executed by someone who understood Nancy's life well enough to know when she was alone, when the cameras could be interfered with, and how to move through that neighborhood in the dark without being stopped. And that person, as of today, March 18th, 2026, has still not been identified, has still not been arrested, or has still not been held accountable for what was done to a woman who just wanted to go to church on Sunday morning. The Pima County Sheriff says the suspect could absolutely strike again. He said that on national television. He said he believes the abduction was targeted, but is not 100% sure. He said, "Do not think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you are safe. Keep your wits about you." Those are his words, the words of the man running this investigation, addressed to an entire community that now lives with the knowledge that someone in their midst spent weekends studying a neighborhood, disabled a utility connection, and walked into an elderly woman's home in the dark. And 45 days later, that person is free. We are all witnesses to this now. Everyone who has watched Savannah Guthrie on a Sunday morning, everyone who has seen an elderly woman disappear and felt the particular, nauseating helplessness of watching an institution move slower than the facts demand. We know what the doorbell camera shows. We know what the car at 2:36 in the morning means. We know what the January 11th and January 24th patterns suggest. We know what a pacemaker going silent means. The investigators say they had strong beliefs from day one. If those beliefs have held, if they still believe what they believed at the start, then someone out there knows something. Someone saw a car. Someone knows who lived in that rental property. Someone knows who worked on that construction site. Someone knows whose weekends look different when January 11th and January 24th and January 31st are placed side by side on a calendar. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. And if she cannot, if the worst is already true, then she deserves justice in the fullest, most complete sense of that word. A name, an arrest, a reckoning, not a press conference, not a memo about resource allocation, a verdict. So tell me this, and I am asking you sincerely, because I think your answer matters. If investigators had strong beliefs from day one, and 45 days have passed, and no one is in handcuffs, what is actually standing between what they know and what justice requires? Nancy,